Hey, everybody. Fascinating chat today on AI governance with a true innovator in the space at ModelOp. Jim, how are you?
Doing good today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for joining from your off the grid location. I see the solar in the background. We got Starlink going. Really intriguing. But before all that fun stuff, maybe introduce yourself and what's the big idea behind ModelOp?
Sure. So I'm Jim Olsen. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of ModelOp and actually did the architecture and design of the original system. So I know a lot about the space, and myself and some of my colleagues have actually been working in this space with previous efforts for a long time, 10 plus years, et cetera, and that kind of things. So have a lot of knowledge about not only the newer generative AI, but also the traditional AI, traditional statistical techniques, et cetera, and how they affect your business. And so that's how we created the ModelOp's solution to actually bring in the full lifecycle management of all kinds of models, everything from an Excel spreadsheet to an LLM foundational model, and now agentic AI solutions as well. So we put that together to make that process a lot easier because we found a lot of companies are struggling getting their solutions using these technologies out to production.
Fantastic mission. And you released a governance benchmark report on AI recently, ideal for this audience. So let's kind of start with the big picture. What was the big idea, the motivation behind this benchmark study, and what did it tell us?
Well, a lot of it was understanding really where companies are at with their AI solutions. There's a lot of disparate information and articles, and I mean, if you listen to the Silicon Valley digital native companies, everybody's using it for absolutely everything, and it's the next biggest thing. Then you talk to some of the enterprises, and they're more hesitant about like, well, how does this impact my business, and what am I willing to put into place, and et cetera. So there wasn't a lot of great clarity into what the plans for an enterprise business actually are in a variety of different spaces. And what we found is a lot of companies are struggling to build trust within their organizations about these solutions because they don't have the insight. We're seeing a lot of IT departments pushing back because they're finding shadow AI. Where we've seen things where we've heard like where hospitals people were posting customer data into chat GPT-4 to get summarizations going around the IT, which obviously that's a huge risk. I mean, it's breaking several laws and that kind of things. So how do they get these processes in place? And so that's where we saw that a lot of companies are just struggling with those concepts as a whole. And in the report, you can see a lot of our findings where it's a lot of people playing with it. They're not getting the solutions out there quickly, so they're losing on business value, but understandably, they also want to make sure they have trust in these solutions.
Well done. And one of the headline stats from the report, 56% of Gen AI projects take 6 to 18 months to reach production. So how do we get out of this kind of quagmire?
Well, that's the foundation of why we built the company.
Mhm.
Much like today, think of software in the 90s. People would actually go and just develop it on their desk, throw it out into production. There wasn't really processes, and because of that, things broke. And at least programming is deterministic in nature, so you're able to put processes in place. Now, what company would not have some kind of a CI/CD pipeline nowadays? Common practice stuff, but back then those didn't exist. What we found is those same kind of processes for enabling basically more efficient deployment of these solutions and understanding and insights into those solutions and reproducibility didn't exist for the basically the model world for AI models, vendor models, foundational models, et cetera. So that's what we created was a process where you can actually automate a lot of this to make it easier because software is very deterministic in nature. AI models, et cetera, are the exact opposite of that. So what can you put in place to provide those insights and build that trust within your organization so you don't hit all of these roadblocks? And we found when we deploy our solution into customers, they were easily cutting that time in half, if not even more so, depending on how sophisticated the company was to start with, and creating just a formalized repository where people can find out who's using this stuff for what use cases, and what is already approved out there. Could I leverage this, et cetera, and that kind of thing. So having that centralized inventory and then an automated lifecycle process to drive the software out to production.
Well done. And you surveyed a number of sectors: financial services, pharma, manufacturing. Did any particular vertical stands out in terms of maturity or challenge with AI governance?
Well, I mean, oddly enough, the ones that have the most challenge with AI governance are the ones that are the most mature because they're forced into it. So, some of our very first customers were obviously financial customers, heavily regulated. You can't have models making trades or predictions or whether somebody gets a loan or not that isn't well scrutinized and understood. So that was obviously the first place that had the most challenges because they could be audited constantly, and had to have everything documented because I don't remember which bank it was, but it was like a multi-billion-dollar fine for not doing this properly. And so there's a lot at stake. So obviously for them, that created the necessity. Necessity is the mother of invention. So you'd see a lot of homegrown processes within there that weren't always so effective because they weren't stepping back from their own business to develop them. And that's by having our own solution that is more neutral and takes all of the ideas into concerns, creates a more efficient solution. We have several firms in the financial sector. What we're starting to see though now is obviously AI is coming into the healthcare industry, and we're literally talking life or death decisions when we get into healthcare. So I see that as a space with even more challenges because they weren't born and bred in the statistical nature of a financial institution where these things are well laid out, well regulated. There's patchwork legislation across different states as to what AI can be used for within healthcare, and of course, there's just the very real concerns. Nobody wants to have one of these models blow up and be a stain on their reputation. Like there was an example in healthcare where long-term care was more being not recommended for minority groups than non-minority groups, and actually resulted in a lawsuit. So there's really real world situations here that come up when you bring these solutions into life or death situations. So we've seen definitely a lot of interest there as well.
Yeah, we all saw what the challengers were with IBM Watson many years ago, trying to an early stab into the healthcare space with a lot of challenges. I think we've matured a lot since then, but still a lot of work to do. And you mentioned the report shows 50 plus generative AI use cases in many cases, but only a handful make it into production. What's that disconnect? Why the drop off?
Well, I mean, there is a natural, to be fair, generically, there's a natural drop off. Everyone's got great ideas, and then bring him to production. There absolutely is always a revision on that. But what's even more driving that now is this lack of trust. People are more skeptical of these solutions because they are non-deterministic in nature. If you have a model that predicts whether a cell is cancerous or not, that's fairly readily verifiable and testable to a degree. You have known labeled use case data and things like that. When we start to get into more like even something as simple as summarize this patient record into a recommendation, or this prospectus from a company into a summary that I can use to make quick decisions about whether we should be investing or not, or these kinds of things, that's not deterministic in nature. So people are naturally skeptical because they can't look at it and say for sure. It sounds good, but is it right? That's one of the challenges is, especially foundational models, they're known for sounding very professional and intelligent, et cetera, but not always quite so factual. So they're very convincing of giving you the wrong information and convincing you it's right. So that it creates this trust because it's so much harder to, one bad kind of recommendation or something from one of these situations is a lot harder to overcome than 1,000 correct ones. People tend to remember the where it went wrong. So how do I build that trust that we are holistically looking at not only the foundational model itself, but its applicability to the use case that I'm doing it, and what risks and mitigations have I put in place to make sure that this use case is well protected. So tying all of these models, all these resources, or now when we're getting to agentic AI, all the different agents involved, the different tools that they use, et cetera, into a single pane of glass inventory like we provide, helps provide that clarity of, oh, well, it's also been used over here. It worked really well over there. Oh, okay, now I got a little more. You can start to build that trust. And these 6 people reviewed it, and these risks were identified and said, yeah, this will be okay because of this. You need that kind of the story behind the model getting out there to build that trust. But then likewise, you can't have building that story be a manual process on an Excel spreadsheet or a SharePoint file or just a bunch of Jira tickets scattered all over wherever. That doesn't give you the story. So that's where, our software helps actually pull that information together into documents and mitigated risks and, findings, et cetera, that all are in one place, and you can actually get that and make sure all those Jira tickets, et cetera, are tied back and happen. So, by just automating all that, making sure it's there and making it readily available, you got to do that whether you build the software yourself or you buy a solution like ours, because otherwise, the process of trying to do the model lifecycle then becomes overwhelming.
Amazing. Spreadsheets for AI governance in, what's this, 1999? I mean, come on, we need to up our game a bit. And that's for you, healthcare, with your fax machines and your email. It's like a zombie that just won't die. The other challenge in the enterprise, as you know, is fragmentation, lots of silos, lots of technical debt. What does that look like in the real world in terms of impacting AI at scale?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you have different people taking entirely different approaches, using different technologies, et cetera, without any consistency, it does create more of a burden on understanding not only getting these things deployed, because it's just work to do that, but then also in doing the reviews of the technologies, et cetera. And a lot of that just naturally comes out because, these are kind of a lot of grassroots efforts that we're seeing initially. It doesn't tend to be as centralized at a higher level. So water finds its own level. So the individual groups are picking their best of breed tools and their solutions and kind of running at it without the knowledge of the other teams and what they're doing because they can't find them. When you get to very large companies, that's just a reality. Cross business unit, team, et cetera, collaboration is a challenge. So you do want to have a centralized process, understandings, and then the ability to automatically generate findings about, hey, have you thought about this, this, and this? Because we've already seen this be a situation in another organization using these. So have you taken this into account? Or, who's the responsible people to talk to, et cetera. So, that's the challenge without having some kind of a centralized, understandable and automated process is there's an inconsistency even in the process itself, which then becomes frustrating to all these individual teams. And nobody's you're not standing on the shoulders of giants within your own company. You're instead all trying to forge it on your own, and we know that never works out as well.
That's not. So let's talk risks. There's still lots of landmines to avoid out there on the regulatory side, lots of compliance risk and fines and other challenges. What do you advise customers to be aware of when it comes to real world exposure?
Yeah, well, it's not just regulation. Regulations are definitely
Mhm.
important because obviously, if you're not compliant with a regulation that's pretty cut and dry, you're going to get in trouble. And what degree of trouble you get into is going to also depend on how much process you can show, because nobody's going to be perfect. If you did nothing, just ignored it and everything, they're going to be a lot harsher on you than if you tried your best and tried to do everything right. Things are still going to go wrong. That happens. They're probably, if it goes wrong just because of a black swan event or something like that, you're probably not going to get in that much trouble from a regulation standpoint. But what we really talk about is, more importantly, is also even just your brand. So it's not even
Mm.
having to do just with a regulatory get a fine. Many products, and especially in the consumer product space, and we work with several on that kind of things, your whole value is in your perception by the customer. Buy one toilet paper versus another. Yeah, there's some differences in the things, but that's not the major way you make money is by making the better toilet paper. You make it by making the better, having the brand that has the name
Mm.
recognition and you trust the quality. If you put AI solutions out there that have a blunder, like, McDonald's put out its automated ordering scheme, and there's tons of videos posted online of people like, yeah, I'll take one fry. Okay, added 11 fries. Oh, no, remove that. I only wanted one. Okay, we have 12 fries, and it kept going on like that. That was a hit to their brand. It made them look foolish. Now, is it going to destroy a McDonald's? No, probably not. But those do have impacts. They have real financial impact that is even harder to measure in the long term, that can still, cause you maybe even more problems than the government fine.
I bet. So you're in a very hot space at the moment. A third of companies evidently are budgeting $1 million or more annually on AI governance software. So congratulations on being in a hot market segment. Maybe talk to us about your space in general, where it's headed, obviously up, but and how do you see yourself competing versus other players out there?
Well, one of our biggest spaces is, we're always staying ahead. To us now, just
Mhm.
straight like a RAG architecture foundational model, that's kind of yesterday's news. Yes, everybody's doing it, and that yesterday's news doesn't mean not very relevant to an organization, and we still have a great focus on there. But obviously, all the buzz right now is around agentic AI and what that means, because that even has larger implications. You're literally
Mm.
giving autonomy to these
Yeah.
foundational models to make decisions about actually changing data within your database, or sending emails, or any of these
Wow.
kinds of things. So that's what we've been working on specifically, is how do we bring agentic AI solutions into the model lifecycle process. And we've done a bunch of work there. We actually have webinars on it on our website. But you can actually start to manage these and things like MCP tools. Everybody's talking about those now. The
Mm.
Anthropic's MCP model context protocol is kind of won the tool war, for lack of a better term, of how to LLMs communicate to actual things that can affect change or read specific data. So like we've incorporated agentic tools right into our solution, so you can actually use agentic AI to do model governance
Mm.
itself and that kind of things. But more importantly, we also have ways of like, how would you approve an MCP tool to use and know which use cases are allowed to use it, and what filters can you put in place, like PII protection. Maybe I know specifically that this particular model may have access to PII data, so I want to block any PII data coming out from it, etc. So we've been building things in that space, knowing that the agentic AI solutions are going to literally change the landscape in that way, and that as these companies put these in place, how do they know what they're doing? How do they know where they're used? How do they know, protect against, deciding all of a sudden to sell all of its stock or something? Truly, with autonomy comes greater danger.
Got it, for sure. Including personal danger, getting into these robo taxis now all the time. I'm always scratching my head. How's this going to go? But I digress. So when you talk to a customer, maybe they're a little skeptical or uncertain as to where to start, how to prioritize this journey. What's your advice to them?
Well, what we suggest is we have a thing called minimal viable governance, which is kind of
Mm.
like, here's the minimum you need to do. If you try to start, I mean, anything, if you try to start out doing it all, then you're never going to get there. It's just like coding. We use more kind of an iterative approach now, as opposed to the waterfall design approach of the past. Same thing with governance: is get started. Start small, get the things in place that you absolutely need. That's going to change by your business. Maybe if you're a financial institution, you need your minimum levels a little higher than if you're just protecting your brand, on that kind of things. And get the processes in place, understand what's there, and treat it iteratively. Continue to grow and add. And that's where our solution, providing a configurable approach to the model life cycles that doesn't require writing code or changing the product itself, really enables you to do that iterative process and even version the process to carry forward. So that way you can evolve. And if a new regulation comes out tomorrow, you can plug it in, or you have, as I said, as your business. But the important thing is, don't wait. The problem's only going to
Mm.
get worse. Get started now, because getting any process in place means there's a process and there's things identified and you know what's going on, versus kind of burying your head in the sand and just waiting until it bites you, because it eventually will. And it's going to get harder to unravel it later when there's a whole bunch of them out there than if you get started when, as we see, there's only so many in production. You have that big backfill sitting behind per this report. You want the process in place to help that backfill not only make sure it's governed and doing the right things, but also help identify those and push those out into production so you don't lose a lot of those maybe good efforts that are buried within your company.
Great advice. So we're halfway through the year. I can hardly believe it. But what are you up to the second half? Any travel, events beyond the summer? What's on your radar?
Well, we're attending a whole bunch of different things. I'll be honest, I don't know all of them because I don't go to all of them on that kind of thing. Like we just recently went to the Chai conference out in Stanford and participated in that, talking about specifically AI usage within the healthcare industry. You know, we've got CDAO conferences we've been going to, constantly doing webcasts. We do our own webinars. I just presented one actually last week on agentic AI and what we're doing there on that kind of things. And you know, a lot is virtual nowadays still, but you know, we're doing some in-person events as well with conferences, et cetera, that are going on and starting to pick up on that. And you know, but really, we're kind of participating everywhere in a lot of different things. So usually, you know, again, this is a kind of more of an iterative space, so things come up and you never know where you're going to go next week potentially.
Exactly. Well, I'm speaking of virtual, I'm admiring your real background, not virtual background. What's up for the summer in Colorado? Any hiking or fishing or hunting or bird watching? What do you get up to there in the woods?
Well, yeah, the wildlife we get watch right from the deck. So we get moose and
That's awesome.
elk and marmots and
Wow.
everything come right up to the deck on that. We actually, myself personally, we have 14 acres here and we have a lot of beetle kill. So I'm always working on cleaning that up,
Oy.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't need a gym membership. I do it by moving trees around and things like that. So we got that, but yeah, we get out into the woods and hike and all kinds of things as well.
Wow.
Take our UTVs around, etc. too, and just
Oh,
yeah,
so fun.
enjoy nature where we can.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining, taking some time away from all that, and congratulations on all the success, onwards and upwards.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. I really
Thank
appreciate it.
you. And thanks everyone for listening, watching, checking out our new TV show at techimpact.tv, now on Bloomberg and Fox Business. All right, take care. Thanks, Jim.